Hi, everybody. It's so good to see you all here. I am very excited to see you and to talk to you today and for you to learn from Sandra. Sandra is going to be talking about some really fascinating things that are kind of up and coming in the nonprofit world and how it will impact your fundraising. So I got a chance to look over her slides the other day, and I learned a lot just from looking at the slides. So I'm very excited to learn from her herself. Just a couple of housekeeping things. We are recording this webinar. So if you have to leave early, if you want to share this with someone that couldn't attend today, don't worry, we're going to send you the recording and a copy of the slides and some additional resources. That will land in your inbox tomorrow around 11 a.m. So keep an eye out for that. And then as we do go through the webinar, if you have questions, feel free to ask them. I would recommend that you drop them in the Q&A box instead of the chat box. The chat sometimes can get moving pretty quickly, and I want to make sure we catch all of your questions and have time to answer them. And then if you are a Twitter user, we are going to be tweeting the highlights of this session over at QGive. You can also check out the hashtag QGive webinar to kind of track those highlights all in one place. If you're not familiar with us, my name is Abby. I'm part of the team over at QGive. We're an online fundraising platform, and our whole goal is to help nonprofits raise more money so they can do more good in the world. And we know that two important things go into online fundraising. One is staying up to date on kind of up and coming technologies, and also staying up to date on what lawmakers are doing that impact your fundraising. And that is why I am so excited to introduce Sandra to you. She has a real knack for explaining how different kind of lawmaker activities are going to impact nonprofits. So I'm going to turn it over to Sandra.
Great. Well, thank you, Abby. And thanks everyone for being here. So Abby, what you all do at QGive mirrors what I do on Capitol Hill. So you try to help, right, organizations do more robust fundraising, right? And what I do in Washington is people always say, what do you possibly do in Washington? So I work with Congress to help them understand your organizations and how people and organizations give and get resources. So they don't do something silly to prevent that. And you'd be surprised. There are lots of silly things that happen. And help them understand that private dollars are really important. It's not just about government dollars going to charities, but it's private dollars that are keeping some of the lights on. And that Congress should really think twice before passing laws and regulations that cut off or even pause that private money. So in sum, I work on behalf of donors, foundations, and charities to make Washington a safe place for them. In addition, Addie had mentioned that about my slides. I added in a couple of slides at the end about cryptocurrency. And the reason why I did that is because there's been a lot of interest around cryptocurrency as a potential stream of revenue for charities. And there's a lot of interest about cryptocurrency generally in Washington. And whether you think it may be right for your organization or not, it's happening. Crypto donors are contributing money to charities, crypto to charities. And I just want to give you a little bit of a peek into the facts and figures. So next slide, please. So here's an overview of what I'm going to talk about today, right? And we're going to put donors at the center of this because donors are key to your fundraising. The small dollar donors are important, particularly if you have enough of them. But it's probably the larger donors that keep you in business. And anything that affects them affects you and your fundraising. And that's what today is really about. I'm going to start off talking about your donors. We're going to get inside their heads a bit. And I'm going to share with you what's got them a little spooked in Washington. Then I'm going to try and convince you that you have a role to play here, because what's bad for your donors is likely bad for you. And then, as I noted earlier, I'm going to offer you some facts and figures about crypto donors and try to get you a little curious. So next slide, please. So we're going to start with getting inside the head of your donors. So donors in Congress sometimes are on different pages. And today, this means three things. And it's those three bullets. Congress loves charities and they want to love donors, but right now there's a healthy skepticism by some lawmakers that rich people aren't paying their fair share in taxes and that rich people don't play by the same rules that the rest of us do. And this skepticism has extended to their philanthropy, to donors' philanthropy as well. Why? Well, there are groups that have come to Washington, like patriotic millionaires, like Half Your Daff, and certain billionaire activists and academics. And they are spending a lot of time with lawmakers and making the case that Congress ought to take a real sharp eye to rich people and their philanthropy. And Congress ought to push donors to do more, do it faster, and do it with more transparency. And there are some in Congress that are taking the bait. So what is this practically? So rarely do ideas begin in Congress. And I'm going to do a little bit of a, here's how things happen. Ideas germinate with an individual or a group, and they get socialized, and coalitions are built to show broad-based support. And then these coalitions approach a member of Congress about their idea, and they ask a member of Congress to introduce a bill. And if the member of Congress thinks it's a good idea and it's worthy of his or her time, they introduce a bill. And then they try to get their colleagues, other lawmakers, interested in the bill. And those supporters of the idea, that coalition of folks, spends a lot of time with lots of members on Capitol Hill trying to get lawmakers to sign on to these bills, to co-sponsor these bills. Momentum develops, and if sufficient, the bill gets made into law. That's how Congress generally works. Ideas are brought to them, bills are introduced, and only a few make it into law. That's the general flow. So the three ideas that I've highlighted on my slide, these three ideas are all in that flow. So the first idea is intended to force donors to pay out from their donor-advised funds on a quicker schedule. Now, that may sound great to you all, right? But however you might think about the merits of this idea, I can tell you that donors love donor-advised funds because they're user-friendly. A couple of clicks and they can recommend funds to charities here, there, and everywhere at any time of the day, any time of the year. We know this because, and we know they're popular because they've exploded in popularity in the past 10 years. But they have their critics, and the critics of donor-advised funds call them warehouses of wealth and have convinced some lawmakers that because there's technically no payout requirement on donor-advised funds, that donors can put money into these donor-advised funds and sit on them forever. Now, that doesn't make any sense from a practical perspective. I'm not saying it doesn't happen, but you put money into a donor-advised fund, it is in there, it can only be used for charity. Why a donor would just sit on it and decide, I'm not going to do anything with it. I mean, I guess it happens, but it just doesn't make any practical sense. And then you look at the numbers, and in the aggregate, supporters of DAFs like to point to the fact that average payouts out of donor-advised funds are between 15 and 20% every year. And that's remarkable, given that foundations are required to pay out 5%, and they pay out about 5%, whereas donor-advised funds don't have a payout requirement, and they're paying out at multiples of 5%. So again, this idea is really germinating in Congress. And again, it's got donors particularly concerned because they really like these vehicles and it has served them well. So the second idea is around the types of assets that go to charities. You've got cash assets and you've got non-cash. So, this idea around restricting non-cash gifts, making it less enticing to give non-cash gifts is an idea that's been around for a long time. But it's getting renewed attention now because of the run-up in value of these kind of hard to value assets of the past several years. So what am I really talking about? I'm talking about art, real estate like ranches and farms, closely held businesses. And for those of you who get a lot of these types of assets donated, the future is looking a little uncertain. So the third idea that's on the table or kind of in the flow is this notion that while donors are able to be anonymous, Congress doesn't like it. Congress wants more transparency. Now, many of you may already know why donors sometimes want to be anonymous, right? Sometimes they don't want anyone to know that they have resources. Sometimes they're giving to unpopular or politically incorrect causes. For those of you who work with Jewish donors, some of you know that for religious reasons, they don't want their name associated with the gift. So there are lots of valid reasons why donors want to remain anonymous. But sometimes anonymity can be viewed as hiding something bad. And so that's why I think Congress and the skeptics of anonymity have called for more transparency. So next slide, please.
Some people have shared, some people have shared that they're having a hard time hearing you. And I think your mic is having a hard time picking up on quieter words. Is there a way you can move closer to your mic or something?
Is this better? Is that better? I can just speak up more loudly. How about that?
I think the sensitivity on your mic is having a hard time picking up. So that is much more clear. So thank you. Here's the next slide.
All right. I will do the best I can. So what does this all mean to you? So, I just like to point out a simple practical impact that may ring true to some of you. When Congress starts getting in the middle of your relationship with your donor and creates uncertainty or even increases the costs of getting certain assets, however well-intentioned, sometimes that causes donors to pause. And pausing financial support creates gaps in your budgets, which are not easily filled. And so that is the real risk to you, is that if Congress starts talking about changing the rules for your donors or enacts legislation or regulation that changes the rules for your donors, it gives your donors pause, and downstream that creates uncertainty for them and uncertainty for you. And we do not want to create uncertainty for you. So next slide, please. So what can you do about it? So what can you do about it that also elevates your organization? So I work with, as I said in the beginning, I work with organizations like all of you to weigh in with lawmakers about what you think about ideas, and specifically about ideas that impact your organizations and your donors, how these ideas are landing with the impact these ideas are going to have on your work. And, I've been on the receiving end of charities that want to weigh in. For several years, I worked in Congress as a senior aide. And so I have been on the receiving end of both donors and charities and then the general business community about ideas that Congress is contemplating that they want to weigh in on. And I'll tell you that I spent all day, every day, hearing the good, the bad, and the ugly about different ideas and proposals and bills that Congress was struggling with. And it really is impactful. And the jobs of aides in Congress is to listen to their constituents, to take information in, because they can't be expert in everything. And to weigh and then inform and share that and share all of that with their member of Congress so that they can make better laws. We like to say in Washington, garbage in, garbage out, right? If members of Congress have poor information or they're uninformed or they're hearing biased information, the end product is going to be a bad vote for them or bad legislation. So I'm a huge proponent in let's educate as much as we can about the impact of ideas and proposals that Congress is thinking about so that we don't get garbage in, garbage out, right? So practically, what does this mean? So by weighing in with Congress, I'm talking about educating them, sending a friendly email directly to your lawmaker or tweeting at your lawmaker or asking to meet with him or her in your hometown about these proposals or other proposals that you find worrisome. All of this is perfectly legal. You're educating your representative about the work you're doing and how bills in Congress that they are actively considering would impact that work. Even easier than that is, I want to put two coalitions on your radar. The Charitable Giving Coalition and the Faith and Giving Coalition for those of you who work on more faith-based missions. But for the general organization charity that works in the sector, the Charitable Giving Coalition spends all day, every day, convincing and persuading and arguing for expanding the charitable deduction so everyone in America can get a charitable deduction for what they give to charities. Now there are limits, but the concept is that it shouldn't just be rich people that get a charitable deduction. Everyone who gives to charity should be valued and should see a value. And so that is what this coalition, works on. The Faith and Giving Coalition, very similar, except they come at it from a more of a religious perspective. But getting involved in these coalitions is signing your name on a letter or saying that you're supportive of, and all of this kind of association with the work being done in Washington could have a direct benefit back to your organization. Why? Because you get noticed and maybe even noticed by some new donors. So next slide, please. So now I'm going to pivot to crypto. And I'm going to pivot to crypto because it's really what a lot of people are talking about in Washington. When a product like crypto has hit the mainstream, when it's in more than one super PAC commercial, right? It's getting a lot of airtime these days, both in Washington and around the country. So I started hearing about crypto donors regularly about 6 months ago. And that's because Congress passed a law that gave the IRS new tools and rules to find crypto donors and tax crypto transactions. And the more I dug into it, the more I realized that there's something in here for charities. Basically, if a donor wants to give, let's say, $5,000 to a charity, and they have a choice of giving cash or giving stocks or giving crypto, it is likely going to be crypto they give if they really want to maximize their tax benefit. Why? Because when a donor gives a non-cash asset, right? That's run up in value. They can avoid the capital gains on the profits, paying tax on the profits of that run up, which is really valuable to them. And when you think about people's portfolio right now, stocks versus crypto has had a far bigger run up, particularly those that bought early, and maybe even not that early, a far bigger run up. So there's far more capital gains taxes to avoid if you give crypto rather than giving a stock or real estate or something else that has had a run up in value, but not nearly as much as crypto. So if given, all things being equal, you're going to give the asset that's had the biggest run up in value. And that is likely going to be crypto. So let me ask a quick question. And I think, Abby, you may have a better window into this because I can't see folks. But for those of you, do we have folks on the call? How many folks do we have on the call that have been offered crypto, or that you know your donors are crypto investors? Abby, do we have a way of knowing that?
Yeah, folks, if you either have accepted crypto or have had donors express interest in donating crypto, would you drop a yes in the chat box? I think that'd be really interesting to hear. Yes, Elise has had crypto come up.
Okay, I'm not expecting. Yeah, I'm not expecting a lot of folks because it is such a new. It's such a frontier for philanthropy and such a frontier for charity. Next slide, please. Oh, actually, no, let's stay on this slide. But when I hear from charities about crypto, these are the three questions that I'm most often asked. Is it a fad? Is it safe? Can it fit in? And I want to address the is it safe for a minute. I think a lot of the concern is, well, where is this money coming from? Who are these donors? Are they trying to launder it through my organization? And I just want to say, if someone comes in with a $2,000 check or a $2 million check, do you ask how they made their money? Probably not. You just say thank you and you take it, right? And I think that there is a lot of mystique around crypto donors, a lot of mystique around where this money is coming from, and is it ill-gotten gain? And I think those are all valid questions. And I think that is why we're seeing the sector take their time and take their time before jumping in with both feet to crypto. Next slide, please. I want to share some facts and figures for those of you who are still curious. And to be honest, after digging into the facts and figures, and then we'll get to the next slide, which is how it's landing with the sector right now, I'm becoming a convert, not an evangelist, but definitely a convert. I think there's something here. And I think that it could be a sustainable revenue stream at some point for donors. So I pulled together some of these facts and figures, and I think some of them are quite surprising. I was surprised about the demographics of the crypto donors. I was also surprised that if you break down income in the country into three kind of top tier, middle tier, bottom tier, crypto is owned equally by each of those tiers. And I thought that was really interesting, that it is economically diverse, and it's held by economically diverse individuals. Could be a couple of reasons for that. I think what I understand is a lot of folks move to crypto because they're currently unbanked in the current system, and it's a way for them to enter a financial marketplace without having to go to the mainstream financial marketplace. I think that two other things caught my eye recently about crypto. The two mayors, one of them, Mayor Suarez of Miami and Mayor Adams of New York City, are both trying to make their cities capitals for crypto. And as a nod to that, both of them are taking their salaries in crypto. And I read recently that Colorado just became the first state to permit individuals to make their tax payments in crypto. Now, that is a big deal. Municipalities, states, governments typically are the final adopters of things. And I think we're seeing a real move to market by some cities and by some states to say, we're there. We want you here. And we're willing to put our and we're willing to put our names and credibility behind it. Similarly, there are bills in California right now to allow crypto tax payments in California. So, I think that we're here, and it's just a matter of time before it becomes. I think mainstream is too strong a word, but becomes a lot more hyped in the charitable community. So let's go to the next slide about the charitable community. So these facts and figures come from Fidelity Charitable. Many of you may know they are a sponsoring organization for donor advised funds, and this is just their data. So this is not the data for the other big sponsoring organizations or for charities generally. This is just Fidelity Charitable data. And I think that one thing is clear here is that crypto is exploding, right? From 7 million a couple of years ago to over 330 million last year. And that is before Congress put into place these new rules and tools for the IRS to find these crypto donors. So I think that given the choice of either paying government taxes to the government or donating to charity, I think I know which way a lot of these crypto donors are going. But what really struck me in this report that Fidelity Charitable just put out was the final bullet, is that there is money on the table, that charities are leaving money on the table. And that's what really gets me, that there is supply of crypto, but not enough demand by charities. And that suggests to me that there's money on the table and that there is a revenue stream that we're not tapping into. So, where's this $331 million going? Next slide, please. These are the organizations that are currently accepting digital assets in crypto. It's everyone from United Way to the Little Sisters of the Poor in Baltimore, Maryland. It's the big, the small, and it's everyone in between. These are the folks who are early adopters, who received $331 million. So now another question. If folks could put in the chat, for those of you who are interested after seeing some of these statistics and seeing some of the organizations that are accepting crypto and are benefiting from crypto, are anyone changing their mind that maybe it's something we need to look into, maybe it's something we need to consider?
Yeah, there's definitely a couple of people who are at least interested in looking into it.
Yeah.
And and it's funny to see all of these. Yes, I want to look into it. Yes, I'm interested in looking at the number of people that haven't had donors kind of offer it is really a cool juxtaposition.
Yeah. So a question I sometimes get is, well, do I have to actually take the crypto? I mean, how, do I have to get a wallet? I mean, how does this all work? And there are organizations that are taking crypto in and giving dollars out to charities. Yet some are donor advised funds, but some are platforms that are, again, taking the dollars in, like a GoFundMe, right? And then giving out dollars to charities. And so I think that there is, and we're going to see a lot more platforms come online because there is supply and there's just not enough demand. So, and I'll just name two. And I am not recommending them. I have not done my due diligence, but I'm following them on LinkedIn. And I'm reading the stories of the charities that are benefiting from them. The first is the Giving Block, and the second is Endowment. And Endowment is spelled D-A-O, Endowment. Those are the two that I'm following. And again, I can't recommend them, but they've got some great stories to tell and a lot of funding behind them. And I think it's worth just checking out.
Absolutely.
Yep. Okay, and then finally, my final slide, and then I would love to take questions, thoughts. This is just a way for you to signal that you want to follow, that you want to hear more about this. Absolutely no commitment, but if you are interested in following more closely, or more importantly, maybe weighing in with your lawmaker, I would love to hear from you to make it as easy as possible, as impactful as possible, both to your organization to weigh in, but also to elevate your profile. So, okay, yes, thank you. Ian, it's Endow with DAO. All right, so I'd love to answer any questions or give you back the rest of your afternoon if you'd rather do that.
We actually have some very interesting comments that are kind of happening in the Q&A box, and it sparked a question in me. So one of our anonymous attendees and one of our attendees, Carrie, mentioned that there are a lot of pitfalls with donor advised funds. A lot of them do have all of that money just sitting in them. Nonprofits that are headed up by women and by people of color are very often the ones that face kind of the largest inequities when dealing with donor advised funds. And it made me wonder, do we have any indication of how donors' giving patterns will change if there are changes to the way we handle donor advised funds? Will that mean more giving directly to causes? Do we think they'll disengage? What do you think? Do we have any indication of what people are going to be doing?
Yeah, so these are all very common and important questions and comments, right? Because there's been kind of a sea change of thought and of interest in tapping into these donor advised funds. And there's a lot of angst out there about the types of organizations that are repeated beneficiaries of donor advised funds, and then all of the ones that are kind of left behind. And so how do we tap into it? In some cases, it is easier than others. There are, in some cases, like a community foundations. Community foundations are set up to bring the community together and to hear from the community and to hear from nonprofits. And that may I'm not sure if folks have availed themselves of those options yet. But for those of you who are still having trouble tapping into donor advised funds, I think I'm not, I don't have an answer for you. But if you're having problems tapping into donor advised funds, there are all these assets that are on the table through crypto donors that are on the table and they're not being taken advantage of. So, I think that when it comes to donor advised funds, the only way that we're going to consistently and verifiably move money from donor advised funds into these women BIPOC led organizations with particular missions, is to mandate it, right? And I'm not sure people are there. I'm not sure people are there yet. I'm not sure Congress is willing to do that. I think that by forcing donors to get more money out the door doesn't mean that that money is going to go out to the causes that you want it to go out to. It may go out to the same causes that's always gone out to. And so I think it is a clumsy way that all of these proposals that are meant to get money out the door quicker are a clumsy way to steer dollars to particular causes or groups. And what it would require, and again, I don't think Congress is willing to go there, is to mandate it. But then you have the questions of, well, these are private dollars that people have taken out of their accounts that they could use for their own personal benefit and have put it for charity. And is it appropriate to say, and now we're going to help you spend it? So I think that there are lots of real reasons why, and not real reasons, but lots of issues on both sides. But again, I think that the ideas that Congress is considering right now, which would force donors' hands just to get the money out more quickly or just to be more transparent, that is, I have real skepticism that is going to quite naturally mean that it's going to get to the types of causes and missions that that you think it's going to.
We have a couple of questions around kind of the not administrative necessarily aspect of accepting crypto, but someone asked, do we need to have specific languages around how we accept crypto? Are we accepting it at all? Do we need to have any specific language on our donation forms or anywhere about how that works for donors?
And that is not a question I can answer. That is probably going to have to be somebody in your development department or one of the lawyers that you work with or accountants that you work with. And the reason is because this is a frontier right now, right? This is a new and growing revenue stream. And so the law and the regulations are trying to keep up. I would, as a matter of fact, I was listening in on a webinar this morning by an accounting firm out of New York. And there are some specific things that one needs to do, an organization needs to do in order to be able to be kind of open for business for crypto. And the accountants seem to have a really grasp of what that is. And so I cannot help with that information, but whoever helps you with your taxes, whoever helps you with your Form 990, that is the first person I would ask. Is how do we manage to do this? Is there anything special that we need to do in order to be in compliance? Okay.
And then related to that, Carrie asked for a little clarification. Are there current laws in place to tax crypto, or is that kind of still in development because this is such a new frontier?
Yeah. So no, crypto is taxable. It's taxed as property. So it's taxed just like real estate is, just like art is, and just like your house is, right? It's property. And so when a donor buys it, let's say for $5, and in 10 days it's worth $500. If the person decides they're going to use it for something, or they want to sell it, they will get taxed on the difference between $500 and $5. And that is called capital gains, right? And when you give, and if instead of selling it, you give it to a charity, right? You don't pay tax on that $495. It's the same for real estate or for stocks and bonds as well. So the donor avoids all of that, as we call inside buildup or profit, tax on that profit. And so, yes, because it has always been taxed as property, but the IRS has not gotten kind of the rules and tools to go after those crypto donors until recently. I'm not sure how many crypto donors, I'm not sure how incentivized they were to raise their hand and say, I owe taxes. But now they are on notice, and the IRS is spending millions of dollars hiring people to go to find these crypto donors and root out their transactions so they can be taxed.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. And this question is purely from me, and it's a weird one. So if this is new, so I'm sure all of us have seen talk about NFTs and digital assets that truly belong to a person. Is there any kind of frame for donating digital assets like NFTs as there is donating tangible assets like real estate or art?
So I'm going to go back and say, I'm going to take a guess here, and it's an educated guess, but it's a guess. And that is, they are treated just like property. It is just like property. So if you buy an NFT for $10 and you sell it for $100, that you pay tax on that $90. Now you may hang it on your wall on a screen and forever, and there's no tax. But when you use that NFT to get something for it, whether it's cash or another NFT, right? Now you owe tax, and you owe tax on the run up in value. Now, again, how are you going to value it? Whatever amount that person is willing to pay for it is the value.
Okay, interesting.
Does that make sense?
Yes, I don't know about the rest of you all, but this conversation makes me feel like a Luddite. Crypto is so new to me. Someone tried to explain what the blockchain meant to me. It went right over my head. So thank you, Sandra, so much for sharing this insight into how it is working and kind of the legal aspect of it. It's been fascinating. That said, those are all of the questions that we have. And I did want to let you all know at the end of this session, when we end the webinar, there's going to be an opportunity to opt into receiving some future communications from Sandra. So if you are interested in continuing the conversation around crypto donations, or if you want to kind of get involved with some of those coalitions to be part of the conversation around donor advised funds and how they work, do avail yourself of that. I know I am opting into receiving emails from Sandra because
to be in
learned
contact.
Yeah. Right. So everyone, thank you so much for spending time with us. I have really enjoyed hearing all of your thoughts. There have been some amazing, wonderful, eye-opening conversations happening in the chat and the Q&A, and I really appreciate not only the time you spent with us today, but the emotional energy you spent with us today. Thank you so much. And Sandra, thank you for teaching us. I learned an immense amount of information in a very short period of time, and I really appreciate you sharing your expertise. You are very welcome. This has been terrific for me as well. Thank you. Definitely. All right, everyone, do keep an eye on your inboxes tomorrow morning. Unless YouTube does something very wacky, you should get a copy of the recording, a link to the slides, and some additional resources that you can use and forward to your friends and whoever else you think should hear this. So until then, have a great day. We will talk to you soon. Thank you.